इस विचार मंथन के जो आयोजक हैं के नियोगी और अमर सिंह अमर, दोनों को मैं गुजारिश करूंगा कि वो यहाँ मंच पर आकर बैठे।
भाई साहब थोड़ा गुलामों की भाषा में बोलिए, आपके मुख्य मेहमान तो वही हैं।
क्या हो गया? हाँ या organizers of today's discourse, Mr. K.K. Niyogi and Amar Singh Amar, I request them to be here. At the same time, to whom we are to listen, Dr. Thomas Walgren from Finland. I request Thomas to be here on the dais. और शुरुआत में मैं थॉमस वॉलग्रेन का परिचय देने के लिए विजय प्रताप जी को यहाँ पर आकर उनका परिचय दे, ताकि सब लोग अवगत हो जाए। जो
उन्हीं से करवा दीजिए ना।
नहीं,
आप डील तोड़िए मत सर, मैं को डाइट पे निकालना। थॉमस
उनका परिचय बोल रहा हूँ।
हाँ तो अपना दे दें, खुद ही घर की बात।
आइए
थॉमस साहब कुछ कहने हैं, उसके बाद वो ऐड कर लेंगे।
नहीं, जस्ट इंट्रोड्यूस करने के लिए।
वही तो कह रहा था कि थॉमस जी खुद अपना परिचय दे देते।
अमर जी तो इस पर बात करेंगे विषय पर।
बस Friends, I don't know when Thomas first visited India, but I met him in 1987, and since that time there has not been any going back. We have done work in whole lot of national and international initiatives. If I start backwards, one big event where national was linked with the international was World Social Forum process was brought to India because of the conspiracies hatched by Mr. Walgren and his other colleague, Mr. Risto Isomaki primarily. I was not very ready at that time for that process, but through series of coincidence I was catapulted with Subhash Lomteji, who is moderating today's discussion. We both were mobilization committee facilitators for 2004 Mumbai. Before that, 87, when he came, we discussed the probably Thomas might have been talking about development cooperation aid, general country to country, but I was so illiterate about the international issues that I thought he was only talking about the voluntary component of development cooperation aid. So, and I was advancing my critique for that. And they were holding a conference, probably it was in July 87 in Karya, Third World Connection. And there was a movement in Finland in early 80s, it was called Percentage Movement, which wanted to go improve upon the UN resolution which had said that 0.7% of the GDP should go to development cooperation budget, and they said no, it should be 1%, and they were able for some time to persuade the Finnish development cooperation policy, and there was 1% budget for some time. So in 87 Karya, they organized one conference to launch a donor agency for voluntary sector. But the discussions before the conference and after the conference led us collectively to believe that with the given power structures between the voluntary sector, civil society of South and North, the money doesn't percolate down to the real life, to understand the real life situation of the two respective countries, and it reinforces the inequalities and legitimizes the upper crust of social action rather than regenerating the social action itself. So there was about a decade of debate in Finland, very intense, in which Thomas and one of his movement colleagues, Auti Hakkarainen, these two contributed actively through writing. Then another friend, Risto Isomaki, who is now a very renowned science fiction writer, he also contributed, but these two wrote a book on development paradigm and development cooperation. And since that time, we had also been simultaneously discussing alternative vision for globalization or alternative globalization. And in that process, one organization called Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam was formed. It was initially unregistered and more like an idea, evolving idea, and then eventually it was registered around 99, 2000? 2000. It was registered by Finnish friends, and from India, VP Singh, our former Prime Minister, Chandrasekhar, another former Prime Minister, Professor Madhu Dandwate, the socialist ideologue, so Mohan, all these people were involved with this idea. And Prabhat Joshi, who was chief editor of Jansatta, founder editor of Jansatta, wanted that to register in India, but there were divided opinion. I was particularly, I used to feel uneasy about that part because Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam means the world is a family, and to do it in India, a group of friends forming a registered organization with a sense of boundaries, I always felt uneasy. So I was rather comfortable in having series of initiatives in an inclusive, open-ended form rather than have just one organization. So in all these journeys and debate, Thomas and his entire colleague of VK has been part of it. And like I mentioned, 2004 WSF, he's another colleague, Mr. Marco Ulvila, and his Marco Ulvila's partner, Yarna Pasanin. They had a 3-month-old daughter. They came here for 6 months, around 6 months, and helped in the 2004 Mumbai Social Forum process. And they mobilized about 60 Finnish volunteers to help in the World Social Forum process in India. The other thing which Thomas and his team has helped is to have a kind of discussion among the green or ecological oriented. There was a big dialogue in which Arna Rai, Medha Patkar, Dr. Uma Shankari, all these friends from Indian side participated, and leading European Greens were there, chairpersons of couple of green parties from Europe. This happened in 2004. Medha, Aruna, all these friends were there, and then many others from our side. Similarly, their former ministers and people of eminence and seniority in the political world. The other thing together we did was we have worked together in Socialist International and Global Greens, a federation of green parties, as well as Socialist International. And thanks to his another colleague Folke Sundman, and his another senior friend who is now Foreign Minister of Finland. With them I visited the Socialist International headquarters, and that ensured that maybe half a dozen head of the states or governments were there in Mumbai Social Forum. About 30-40 senior politicians had come, and we had very good interaction with the Socialist International leadership. When we say international, unfortunately, in most, especially before WSF, it meant only a sprinkling of South and mostly Europe. And Europe also white Europe, not immigrants, not non-whites. So, so that has been the journey where we have been trying to change the predictable in the international relationship through people's participation. One high point was Helsinki process, which almost grew along the World Social Forum process, and this was Finnish and the Tanzanian government had set up a group on global democratization, in which intellectually Thomas Walgreen contributed in a big way, and his colleague was Foreign Minister at that time, who still is, Erkki Tuomioja, who was the chair of that process, and the other co-chair was Tanzanian Foreign Minister, who later became the President of Tanzania. So I think he still is President of Tanzania. And in that group, whole lot of people of eminence from the civil society, the radical types. Martin Khor was there, Susan George was there, New Ecological Foundation or New Economics Foundation, Anne Pettifer, an ecological economist, she was there. Then from the establishment side, Stoll Talbot, the Minister, Secretary of State or Deputy Secretary of State of US, he was there. Then British WTO's first Secretary General was there. So it was a kind of multi-stakeholder. World Council of Churches chairperson was there. World Bank Europe Vice President was there. So I was also one of these 22 members in that group. And in that, when the time came for the culmination of this process, was a conference in Helsinki, where under Thomas' leadership we had an introspective fast when all the international delegates had come, where this planet is heading towards on that issue. We had this fast, and in that conference the Indian team was the biggest, because the seniors like our Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, former Digvijay Singh, Harsh Mandar, Om Thanvi, Indian Express, Hindi chief, Prabhat Joshi, all such people were there, but they all stayed in a hostel-like situation so that others could also go. And a very big group from our VK network and most had gone there. One very strong point about the Finnish civil societies and Indian civil societies relationship has been overwhelming majority of people, their passports were made for the first time when they were going to Helsinki, be it Amar Singh Amar when he went for the exchange program, or our other colleague Atal Bihari Sharma was there yesterday, or like this time Manoj Sinhal's visa to Tunis is rejected because he made the passport for the first time. It was applied for, and his travel was sponsored by a women organization led by the same person I was mentioning, Auti Hakarainen. So it's a long journey where we have tried to sort of it required a lot of effort to, transcend the boundaries, given boundaries of conventional civil society relationship, and trying to access not just the ideas of the alternatives, but ideas from ordinary people and from their ordinary life, how to reimagine our future, which is a shared future for the entire planet, and this cleavage between North and South, whether within the nation states of even of the South or North, is not there. So in this journey, we relate only to the political part of Thomas Walgreen because he is a eminent philosopher. I won't talk about that because I am not competent. His political part is that he is not an armchair philosopher. He has been active, as I told you, in 80s he was part of the leadership collective on percentage movement, and then he was in 86 probably, October 86, founder of Green Party then, and now he is representing Social Democratic Party for the second time in the Helsinki Council. He is elected there, and in Social Democratic Party he also carries on his battles from the feminist, leftist and green perspective, because Social Democrats world over, like our country also, are more becoming similar to neoliberalism, as was pointed out by Pablo from Bolivia when he was there inside the office, that when Marxists came to power, they became neoliberal. So similarly, in India, both Marxists and non-Marxists left, the socialists, when they come to power, they become totally neoliberal. Story is not very different in Finland or in Nordic region, and we still believe that this is not the inevitable thing to happen. It arises out of lack of clarity, lack of political will, and lack of maybe some level of commitment to those ideals which we claim to believe in. So this is the kind of context rather than Thomas Walgreen's introduction. I gave this long introduction because we are going for a next joint work. Many of the people like Soumya Datta, Oves, and myself, we are all going to Tunis World Social Forum, and we want to just assess, is it possible to reinvent the World Social Forum process in India on issues like deepening of democracy or ecological crisis, or for a global policy making last person first as the policy and power to the people, how to sort of democratic empowerment processes in that space. Is there a possibility of reinventing the process nationally as well as globally, and for which a lot of Indian groups have shown interest, and Thomas had a key role in exporting the process, WSF process in India. So today he is speaking on this topic, people's response to present times and crisis. So in that probably WSF will also figure in. So I'm thankful to Subhash. He gave me this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Vijayji. Now, now I will request Dr. Thomas Walgreen, because as Vijayji has said rightly, that at present, at a global level, these neoliberal economic policies are playing a vital role. And in this perspective, how European Gandhian socialists see towards all these things. So I request Thomas Walgreen to speak on.
Thank you.
Silent पे कर सकते हैं.
I'm afraid the mic is such that one has to speak close to the mic. So I'll be sitting in this awkward position so that you can hear me. That's one. Second, the hall is a little bit unfortunate. I sit here with many old friends, and I feel like speaking to strangers. So let's see if we can enjoy the conversation despite the strangeness of the hall.
If you feel comfortable, you can stand and speak.
Yeah. Let me see how this goes. It will be easier. Even more formal. Even more formal. So everybody will be alienated, but I will be more relaxed. Is that okay? Yeah.
You can stand.
No, so I'm further away.
वो stand दे दें वो आएगा नहीं
Maybe you don't need the mic.
Yeah, the mic should be. No, the room is a bit difficult also without the mic.
Let him take it.
If this works, otherwise I'll sit down there. Let's see. Now I should sing a song. Anyway, let me just reflect a little bit on the story and then say a few words about the contemporary situation and how we respond to it in my part of the world and how I see others responding. But the context, Subhash very rightly defined what I can do. The only thing I can possibly do is to speak here as an exemplar, as the token person who speaks from my Northern European perspective, out of a concern for the global situation, out of a tradition which has, I have grown up as a green socialist, feminist, Nordic, engaged citizen. So that's my outlook. And the first thing I want to share is the fundamental reason that brings me here, and that is in my part of the world when we grow up. We grow up first, and I was born in '58, so '60s I was a kid, '70s I was young. I grew up in a country which was just making it, becoming part of the club of rich countries. So I was looking at the world as first, primarily from the perspective of belonging to a club of people on the globe who are happy to have achieved, but also increasingly worried about their privileges. So there's an urge in every child, and also a strong urge in me when I was 10 years old, to be able to live in a relation of dignity and friendship with the last person. I had not heard about Gandhi. Well, I had heard about Gandhi, but not read Gandhi. But the urge to be a friend of the last person on the planet was very strong. And it was very difficult. Then you look around, the story I like to tell, but it's an important story for me to share. So you look around and see, so who are the ones who are not friends of the last person? Well, it's the white educated male, because they had the colonial past, and now they're engaged in this monstrous imperialism, and we are the ones who are destroying the planet. So my future is to become one of those who destroy the planet. And I wasn't so happy about that. So I thought, what can I do? So the first thing that comes to mind is, well, I can become an expert, and I can go and educate Subhash Lomte and his friends how they can produce more food. So I become an agricultural expert. But then I became suspicious about that the change that the planet needs is not the change, well, maybe it also has to be a change in India, but I can never become an expert on change in India. Oh, it's very difficult. Why would I not ask my friends there? So, but I can perhaps become an expert, at least a participant in the search for change in my country. So how Finland and Europe could be a more responsible partner to other people's and other species on the globe. So that is the search. That is a search, in the search for better futures, more responsible futures of solidarity of Finland with the last person. I came here not to teach, but out of curiosity, what are the people's movements doing here? And so this has been the encounter that I've been very happy part of, and many of you have shared with me, that we have wanted to meet because our destinies are more entangled because of this thing, development and colonization, and its current form, neoliberal globalization. Our destinies and our practices and our habits and our discourses are more deeply related and integrated. So we need to speak with each other, but we need to speak and take the lessons home. So I'm here again to meet with friends here and to listen and learn, share my experiences and learn from yours and take it home and see what I can do in my family, with my friends, in my community, in my country, in my Europe, so that what we do, our practices, our habits, our political structures, our economic ambitions would be more acceptable to ourselves and in how we see that in relation to other countries. So this is the reason for coming, that I hope again to bring something home. One other thing I want to bring home is how you react to my understanding of where we have reached. And that's why we have this global title. So what I would like to do now is to spend a short time, 10-15 minutes, on describing sort of what people call global crisis, and to describe how I see some very basic things about how I see people react to the crisis. And then my hope is that then we can discuss. If you like, I'm quite willing to go into details about the reactions in Europe, or in Finland, or in Helsinki, or in my family, because those are the things about which I have more in-depth knowledge. So I'm open to discussions and questions about the European and Finnish situation and how we fight back in our country. But I would prefer to start just with a more global perspective and give my limited perspective on the global perspective. And then we can discuss that. So this is how I thought I would proceed. First, define the crisis, then take a broad look at the different regional responses, and then place myself in that context, the World Social Forum, etc., and then discuss. So if the chair allows, that was the introduction to the topic, and then some words about the topic. Okay, Subhash doesn't stop me yet, so I will go on. Now, things change. Our political context, of course, has changed very dramatically, and I think there's truth in the fact that around 1990, the political context, the way the political challenges we face when we search for solidarity and ecological responsibility, those do change around 1990, and they change if we look at how we defined crisis before 1990 and after 1990. Between 1960 and 1990, the political movements I grew up with and come from and identify with, we defined crisis as crisis of environment and development. The ecological crisis was the new thing. The limits to growth debate was there. The planet doesn't have carrying capacity for the kind of lifestyle, the kind of consumption, the kind of industrial exploitation that's happening on the globe. So we had since 1960 up to 1990 growing awareness of ecological crisis. That's one thing that shaped the movements of my generation. The other thing was the sense that the problems called development are problems that are interrelated to the problem of environment, in the sense that the current goals of development in East and West, in communist Soviet and in US and in Europe, and the kind of development that World Bank, with our money and our help, More friends are coming, so I'm happy to see friends here. So we saw that between 1960 and 1990, the growing awareness was that the ecological crisis is internally related to the development model of the aspirations, the cultural imagination that was shaping the economic and political ambitions both of the Soviet system and the US system. So we thought there's a crisis of environmental development that we have to respond to. If we want to live with dignity in relation to the last person, our task is to respond to the crisis of environmental development. Then things happened. The obvious thing that happened and that has big implications is, of course, the fall of the Soviet Empire. And that has one thing, the good thing it brought about for global movements was that the peace movement was very important in the 70s, 80s, and the peace movement was motivated as a global movement out of the fear of the nuclear fallout, the catastrophic nuclear war that will destroy the planet totally. Now, on that point, the fall of the Soviet Empire brought some relief. We no longer see that people will push the button 8 seconds from now and the planet will go up in flames. I will come back to the topic of war because we don't have the immediate threat of the planetary catastrophic war. Instead, we have the post-modern world war, as I call it, and we can discuss that if we like. But that's one thing, one of the consequences of the downfall of the disintegration of the Soviet Union. The other, of course, is that one dream that had inspired many people had lost its credibility. A certain dream of development and how to tackle also the environmental development problems lost its credibility, and the other dream was left in place. The neoliberal dream was left in place and became predominant. So this thing happened. There was one dream was lost, and the dominance of another became stronger. But from the perspective I grew up with, what was lost? The Soviet experiment, the failure of the Soviet experiment, of course, didn't mean a liberalization, didn't mean emancipation for us, because the development model, they had been pursuing the same. So in that sense, it didn't change the fundamental sense of how we define our task. In my kind of movement, wasn't changed by this shift. The thing that was a deeper change was the Brundtland report on sustainable development from 1986. I don't know how many of you remember, but in my part of the globe, 1960s, 70s, 80s, the concern about the ecological crisis was such that people thought, oh, there's something wrong with our development ambitions. There are limits to growth. We have to rethink development goals. But then this Norwegian lady was a chair of a commission for the United Nations, and a very nice, educated, very caring Norwegian lady, Brundtland, was the chair of this commission. And they produced a report. And what was the message of the report? The report said, well, it's true, ecological problem is very bad. And it's true, we absolutely have to do things. We have to do something about the ecological crisis. What we need to do is to make development sustainable. We don't need to change development goals. We don't need to give up industry. We don't need to give up capitalism. We don't need to give up any of the luxuries we have. But we just have to do the same thing that we're doing, but with better administration, smarter organization, better technology, and things will go on as before. So there was an elimination of the idea that environment is a crisis for development. So that's one thing. So after 1990, there was less awareness. There was less of a cultural awareness in politics, because both of the fall of the Soviet Union, and because of the de-radicalization of the ecological imagination. So political fantasy became more narrow. The political imagination became more narrow, and what happened was, 20 years later, I mean, if in 1990 people like us met, we said, we have a global crisis of environment and development. And maybe we also spoke of the nuclear threat. So these environment, development, and nuclear threat. When we meet now, we say, number one is finance crisis. And then we have consequences in terms of we have development problems, we still have starvation, we still have ecological problems. But the peace agenda, the ecological agenda, and the agenda of taking care of the last person, eliminating starvation and poverty, this agenda has been has fallen to second place. And the first thing when we meet, and I speak about meetings, I think also maybe even World Social Forum, let's see in Tunis next week. But when we meet in Europe to discuss people's movement strategies, when we have met the past 5 years, what we have been discussing is economic crisis. So in a way, so that's a big change. And of course, you can give all kinds of motivations, and I will. I mean, there is, of course, we have objective reasons for this. Because finance crisis that has happened, of course, in most regions in the world before it hit US and Europe. Lehman Brothers, was it September 08, 5 years ago, 4.5 years ago, and then Euro crisis a year later. So the kind of crisis we have with the crisis in the finance system, which threatens financial collapse, threatens the economy of all people. Threatens the pension system, it threatens the wage system, it threatens the investment system. So the financial collapse threatens the to destabilize and crush the viability of the lives of ordinary people. And this happened first in places like Indonesia, it happened in Argentina, it happened in Mexico, and then it happened in US and Europe, and it became a global problem, because when it happens to us, then it happens globally. That's what we think, and maybe it's also true. So this thing has happened. It's true that financial instability is dangerous to the social social cohesion, is dangerous to the economy of everyone. So this, so we now have finance crisis as the number one, and climate, and environment, and poverty, and even to some extent even wars. Because the war has become so diffuse. All these other topics on the political agenda are dominated by this talk about finance crisis. There was a nice example, and not nice, but a terrible example. My friends, we have met some of these civil organizations are alive and kicking in Finland, and one of them is ATTAC. I mean, if you've heard about ATTAC, it's a big thing in Europe and Latin America. Especially in Europe, it's been a big thing. ATTAC is an organization that has been advancing, it's been formed around the agenda of finance crisis. So it's one of the new, it's reacting to the finance crisis. So ATTAC is an organization which has been very much part of the World Social Forum movement. And it has been suggesting reforms of the finance system, including most famously the Tobin tax, or taxing finance transfers. So the finance system would be a smaller part of the economy and would be a more controlled and integrated part of the economy, and not this outside predator, which goes in and sucks out the achievement of the real economy. So ATTAC is there. ATTAC Finland had its annual meeting a few days ago. I think it was a Monday. And there was this statement. ATTAC Finland in its annual meeting made a statement. Same day, coincidentally, German ATTAC also wrote a letter to its parliament. And what is the content of the statement? The statement says, look, people are causing finance chaos. So in order to contain and we must regulate the economy, and the first thing that we must do is we must democratize the European Central Bank, and we must allow the European Central Bank to bail out people in the suffering countries, South Europe, because they have enormous unemployment, etc. All this is fine. But then the punchline of the statement is that Finnish ATTAC says, unless we save the unless we save the European Central Bank, then this debt deflation will continue, unemployment will continue, The rise of fascism, we have real fascism rising in South Europe, will continue. And worst thing of all, we might destabilize the European Union. So we have this enormous loss of ambition in politics. The rise of fascism is bad, unemployment is bad, but the worst thing is if we destabilize the European Union. So this is the kind of, so what's happened to us when we spoke about the environment crisis and development crisis, there was a vision that we can live better with less. There was a vision of an alternative development pattern. Now, many of friends have been brought to a point when the best we can say they can at least win back a little bit of the stability and dignity we had 5 years ago. So this is the kind of thing that I think has happened in Europe. But that's going ahead of things a bit. Main point so far has been that 20 years ago, there was greater space in people's responses to the global crisis for a search for alternative development patterns and models than there is today. And now with finance crisis and neoliberal capitalism playing its dirty tricks, we have a lot of preoccupation with that topic and the other topics which have not lost their urgency. Climate catastrophe is rampant. So environmental problems are not lesser than before, but attention to them is lesser because other problems have become more prevailing. So that's one thing that's happened, at least in my part of the world. Now let me take a brief look. So this is number one. Number two, I'd like to share with you some very primitive, I think, reflections on how people have reacted during the past 20 years to this crisis. And I'll take a regional perspective. Let me first say a few words about Arab Spring and my reading of it. And I'll go to Tunis next week to learn much more. So I say this with, you should be aware of my ignorance. But still, it's important that we do address it. Arab Spring is a thing that affects all of us. And how we understand it and how we understand their response and their opportunities will affect our agendas at home. So we have to at least share our ignorance if we can't share our wisdom. My reading is that Arab Spring was above all motivated by the search for freedom and a desire to participate more in society. And the picture I have in mind is this is the thing that also brought down the Soviet Union in late 80s and 1990. That you live in dictatorship and you want some freedom in your life, you want some freedom from tyranny, and you want some participation in society. And some of that freedom, I suppose, some of it has been achieved. But the writing on the wall, as I see it, is that the thing that's happening now in Arab Spring is a thing that happened 20 years ago in Estonia and in Czechoslovakia and in Romania and in Russia. That what is the thing we want to participate in? We seek participation, but what do we want to participate in? What do we want to build when we are allowed to participate? In the case of the Soviet, it was clear that the people who took the initiative and brought down the Berlin Wall wanted a society with very high ambitions in terms of cultural and social justice. And what happened was that the majority was then, the dominant picture was a very crude form of capitalism. So that the worst forms of capitalism within Europe are now in the ex-Soviet countries. So participation was a participation in capitalist consumer society with its forms of social mobility. What happens now in Arab Spring is more ambivalent. See, what's a space for the capitalist dream, for something which is just to catch up with the West. But then this whole question of the Muslim Brotherhood, and to what extent is there in the Arab world social movements, big social movements rooted in different traditions than the European, the American ones, and also different than the Soviet tradition? To what extent is there a cultural aspiration and a vision of that is an alternative form of development? So this is the thing I would like to know more about, and if you can inform me on that, I'd be very keen to hear. I think that's one of the interesting things. What is the thing people now want to participate in Tunis, in Egypt, in Syria, if they get over the war, which is going to be a difficult proposition? So that's one. Latin America. Same thing after fall of Soviet Union. terrible strength again of the neoliberal attack. But also in this region of the world, there's been, as we know, and have been eager to listen to, there's been this rise of the new Latin American left. With of course Lula in Brazil as the most important figure in terms of muscle and power and economic performance. But then with Chavez in Venezuela and with Ecuador and Bolivia, the Andean. And the interesting thing there is that both Chavez, the combination of Chavez and Bolivia, Chavez and Evo Morales, is what they want to do when they fight neoliberalism. It's not simply to achieve the same thing as capitalism with more distributive justice. There's this thing called Bem Vivir, good life. Pablo Solon was here, he must have spoken about good life with you. Pablo Solon from Bolivia. So there is, I think Latin America is, in Irish thing, I don't know enough about Muslim Brotherhood. What is the cultural vision? But in Latin America we see that even though the majority, the flow that gets most of the votes and still direct society is very much inspired by an ambition to be part of the industrial consumerist life form. So when Evo Morales was in Finland 2 years ago, and we invited him for a football game, and he played football with us in Finland. This was late May, and it was a beautiful day, and we played football, Bolivia-Finland. And Evo was leading his team, and they won 5-1. And I was very disappointed that he was a better football player than I am. But then he gave a lecture in the University Hall. And Evo said, we have this conflict between people who want between modernization and local aspiration. So mining industry is the measure now in Ecuador, in Bolivia, I think also in Venezuela, which are no less, where these two conflicting tendencies. In Latin America left, in that region, the reaction to the finance industry, the reaction to the neoliberal left, has been informed by two dreams. One is the dream of democracy and distributive justice, the old socialist dream of the 20th century. This is one part of the dream. And the other dream is the more ecological, to regain, to use the wisdom, the ecological wisdom of the Andean tradition, and also of the Amazon Indians. And we were there in World Social Forum in Belém a couple of years ago to see the movements, for the first time the Amazon basement Indian movements met with the Andean Indian movements and inspired each other. And we're telling the old left of Latin America that, look, we don't only want your model of industry and consumption and big cities, we want to have respect for nature and want to have Bem Vivir, and we have to have, so ecological justice is part of the constitution in Ecuador, for instance. So Evo Morales was saying, look, he told his life story, and here I am president of this country, I was brought to this position as one of my movements, and what can I do? I need money, I need investment, and I also need to protect nature and my people, and it's very difficult, and I struggle with these difficulties every day. So there's an awareness, there's an ambition to do something which is not just a copying of the West. But it's also very difficult because, again, poverty is there, and how do you eliminate poverty unless you have some economic growth? So this question is very acute, but at least one has a sense, in Latin America there's a very intense everyday struggle by very eminent football players about this issue. Euro and US, the news are not so upbeat, they're more depressive, I think, and post-Soviet as well. What's happening with us? First thing, and maybe that is the most important fact to note, that social movements in Europe who speak about environment, who speak about development, who speak about peace, are relatively weaker than they were 20 years ago. And the agenda of economy has taken over in a big way. Now, how do people react? How do people fight back?